2021 is coming to a close, so today I'm looking back at all of the new stories that came out over the past year, and I'll be picking my favorites, kind of an essential watching and reading list for Star Wars fans that want to know where to dive in. Let's start with television, and the most obvious pick from 2021 is The Bad Batch, which was a series that really surprised me. Like a lot of fans, I was skeptical of an entire show following these over-the-top caricatures from the final season of the Clone Wars, but it was really good. The entire batch became more nuanced and enjoyable very quickly, Omega was adorable, and the writing struck a near-perfect balance between telling stories with a purpose about a fascist government replacing a democracy, with also showing us cool new Star Wars stuff. Having Cad Bane return was thrilling, seeing Kamino's destruction was surprisingly emotional. There were a couple episodes that fell short, but overall, I think The Bad Batch is the strongest first season of an animated Star Wars series that we've ever had. To be fair, it was built up off the back of the Clone Wars, and I think that gave it a leg up. It feels like it's made for fans who grew up with the Clone Wars, but it's still accessible to a younger audience that might be getting into Star Wars for the first time. I do think you'll get more out of The Bad Batch if you watch the Clone Wars first. If you've never done that, you absolutely should. But if you're feeling hesitant about Star Wars animation and you want to give something a shot, The Bad Batch might be a better entry point for someone in their 20s or 30s. We also got Star Wars Visions on Disney+, and that was a fun experiment. I don't think I would call the series a must-watch, especially for someone who's just looking to stick to the canon stories, but Visions is a pretty low time commitment, and most people who've watched it seem to walk away with at least one short they really loved. The Ninth Jedi was my personal favorite, but The Duel and The Village Bride are two more that I see getting a lot of love. I would definitely encourage fans to give Visions a shot. It's only 2.5 total hours of watch time, but if you're like, I've only got time for one and only one Star Wars animated series, you should make it The Bad Batch. And that's it for television in 2021. Yes, I know the Book of Boba Fett is technically a 2021 release with its first episode coming out yesterday. Obviously, you should watch it, but I'm not going to pretend to judge the entire series based on one episode. 2022 is going to have a lot more to talk about on the Disney Plus side of things with Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, The Mandalorian Season 3, The Bad Batch Season 2, and maybe more, but I'll be covering all of that in tomorrow's video, so let's move on to books. And honestly, this is where Star Wars has just been crushing it for me this past year. Obviously, live-action Star Wars content is what gets the most attention. When films or The Mandalorian are coming out, that's when Star Wars fans come out in droves. A pretty distant second would be animated projects like The Bad Batch, but as a fan that was introduced to Star Wars in the mid-90s, I didn't have any of that. I had the books. The novels were the backbone of the Star Wars universe at that time, telling big, galaxy-changing stories in one-offs or trilogies or series like The New Jedi Order. I have very fond memories of reading those books growing up, and Star Wars books have remained important to me. And while the new canon had some really great stories, many of them felt small compared to the old Legends books. I think Phasma is insanely entertaining and unique, but it was very much written in support of live-action content. I loved the first canon Thrawn novel, but it didn't have the same scope as the Thrawn trilogy, and it was written in support of animated content. So many Star Wars books in recent years have been focused on telling one character's backstory from a movie or a show or a game. I missed the scope of Legends Star Wars novels. Enter the High Republic. It is exactly what I was hoping it would be. Set 200 years before the events of the Skywalker saga, it's in this little pocket of the Star Wars timeline that has barely been touched, so it has the freedom to do whatever it wants. It can tell stories with massive scope, and I have walked away from each book and comic so far glad that I read it. If you're a Legends fan, I would highly recommend giving the High Republic a chance. If you want a little more variety in your Star Wars and you want to get away from the Skywalker saga, these stories are for you. If you want a fast-paced and well-planned series, that's exactly what Charles Soule, Cavan Scott, Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, and Daniel Jose Older have crafted. But the High Republic is already becoming daunting to jump into, so where should you start if you're interested? Light of the Jedi, it's the first novel of the series, and it also happens to be fantastic. It is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars books. It's full of classic Star Wars themes like selflessness and hope in the face of destruction and despair, but that's all perfectly balanced with the pulpy and fast-paced style of A New Hope and the adventure serials it was based on. The second novel, The Rising Storm, is just as good. It's different in style and pacing, but it never feels out of place. I think you would be fine if you're feeling overwhelmed by The High Republic and you just want to read the main novels in the series. There are only 2 so far, the third will be out in a matter of days. They'll give you everything you need to know for the era, but diving into the young adult novels like Into the Dark and Out of the Shadows will give you more context in between the main novels, and then the 2 comic series will give you even more. Actually, I think picking up the Marvel run by Cavan Scott alongside the main novels will give you the most clear picture without having to read everything. It's been one of my favorite Star Wars comics in a long time, probably since Charles Soule's Darth Vader run. Each issue has some significant bombshell and feels important. The comics don't feel like an afterthought, they feel vital, even though the books will do a decent job at telling you what you need to know from them. It's like I know I don't have to read everything in the High Republic. I'll learn it one way or the other, but I want to know what's going on as it's happening. I want to see this story unfold as fast as I possibly can, and the comics give you that monthly hit in between the books. And if I'm going to talk about comics, I have to talk about Trail of Shadows. We're only 3 issues into that miniseries, but it has been so good. It's a noir mystery story following a Jedi investigator and a private eye, and it's such a fun genre for Star Wars. Daniel Jose Older is knocking it out of the park, and honestly, I am trying really hard to rein myself in when I talk about the High Republic because it has been one of my favorite Star Wars things to happen in a long time. I'm trying to recommend just what I consider to be the best of the best in this era, but I've walked away from every single story feeling rewarded. Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm have been my absolute favorites so far, but I'm genuinely glad that I've read everything. My hope is that the High Republic becomes the gold standard for Star Wars publishing moving forward, that we can get another group of authors to sit down and develop their own corner of the galaxy to explore through books and comics and audio dramas, and we can just do that over and over again. But that's enough of me blathering on about the High Republic. There's one other book I want to mention from 2021, and that's Victory's Price by Alexander Freed, the final book in the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a sucker for pilot stories. The Legends X-Wing books are still some of my all-time favorites. Victory's Price is a different kind of pilot story. I'd say it's not as pulpy and fast-paced as I usually prefer my Star Wars to be, but the characters are so good that I was immediately won over. I wouldn't read Victory's Price without reading the other 2 books in the trilogy first, but it was one of the most thought-provoking Star Wars stories I have read in a long time. That's going to do it for books, and we're basically going to close out here with comics. I'll set aside the various High Republic series since I've already lumped them in with those books, and I'll jump right into War of the Bounty Hunters. This was a monster crossover event that had its own series and also involved all of the other ongoing comic series including Star Wars, Darth Vader, Dr. Aphra, and Bounty Hunters. Overall, I thought the crossover event was a mixed bag. Some great issues, some issues that felt like they were just treading water and waiting for the other series to catch up. But I still think the War of the Bounty Hunters was a big shakeup to every series and introduced a lot of exciting ideas for the universe. For example, the return of Kira and Crimson Dawn. I never would have guessed that would be a part of it, and I think that alone makes at least the main War of the Bounty Hunters series worth the read. You'll get the main story of how Boba Fett lost and recovered Han Solo in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi without having to read all 34 issues. It'll also set you up for Crimson Reign, the next series following Crimson Dawn, which will conclude in 2022 with The Hidden Empire. Crimson Reign has already begun, but I'll save my full thoughts on it for next year. I also want to point out how much I continue to enjoy Dr. Aphra. Alyssa Wong has been writing some really fun treasure hunts for the character that have tied into the High Republic era, but the end of the War of the Bounty Hunters was awesome, with Aphra running into some technology meant to replicate the dark side of the Force, and now she's on a quest to find more, and I just love those Indiana Jones villain vibes. Aphra is an amazingly fun blend of classic legend stuff and new characters and weird possibilities that I love. And with that, I'm bringing today's video to a close. This felt like a lighter year for Star Wars content, but there were still some really great new stories to check out. So to recap, if you're strapped for time, watch The Bad Batch, read Light of the Jedi and the Rising Storm, and read the main 5 issues of the War of the Bounty Hunters comic series. And if you find yourself excited by the High Republic, I've got a few videos on reading order you can check out if you want to continue down that rabbit hole. But that's it for today. What were your favorite Star Wars stories of 2021? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.